In today's data-driven world, we are faced more so than ever with the reality of a police or surveillance state driven by obscure, complex, and overreaching laws promoted and established by shadowy, anonymous figures, themselves shielded from the realm of democracy. Many are the people who can discuss the daily ramblings of geopolitics and the phases associated with organizations, speculating on this or that or some other thing, but few are the explanations delving into the realms of occultism. Even fewer are the discussions revolving around the occult that aren't dramatized or distorted through a lens of Christianity into something unrecognizable or hosted by some nitwit podcaster for the sake of likes and subscriptions, etc., etc. So, let us dive into the esoteric side of the pool to see the mythos of the law and the archetype of the judge whom presides over it. Both forthcoming examples being of the Indo-European language family. The English word data shares the same root as Old Persian data, which root holds the meaning to give, to set forth, or that which is given. Old Persian data indicated law or a decree, as the law was seen as being set forth or given by a divine authority. Here, we arrive to the first intersection of the mystery rites. Here we have Mithra, the Lord of Love, the Lord of Contracts, the Lord of Law, the Lord with 1,000 eyes, whom sees all and whom bestows the divine unction upon royalty. Mithra is or was a figure worshipped especially by the Iranians, Indians, and Italians, but whose mysteries extended throughout the entirety of Eurasia, with Mithraims even being found throughout Africa. Mithra was known by many names, but this information is trite, and the presence of Mithra under many guises and many cultures is well understood to even the least learned of neophytes. It will hardly be necessary to say more on the subject here than that Mithraism serves as the hypostasis of the mystery rites, which is the crux of Masonry. Let's take a moment here to reflect upon an ancient term little recognized in modernity, one which holds particular significance to issue of law in Masonry, Patishi Siri. For an extremely nuanced explanation, see my prior video, The Kabiric Fraternity of Freemasons. Here I will summarize with a relevant quote from the work of Dr. Orlando Donna Miller, titled Harmode or the Mountain of the Assembly, found on page 68. Quote, "That which completes the view is the fact that the entire phrase Patishi Siri is explained by Dr. Schrader as sublime master. I have already insisted upon the idea that the expression here referred to is not simply laudatory in general but technical. And this results not only from what has been before stated, but from the assimilation of the term patishi by Dr. Schrader in the place just cited to the Hebrew patish, hammer, a well-known symbol of the Kabiri, whose mysteries were celebrated throughout antiquity. In fact, a term denoting the hammer was the name of one of the chief Kabiric divinities. A still further confirmation of our view here, amounting almost to a demonstration, is found in the term patisi, habitual designation of the pygmy images of the Kabiri. Much doubt has existed as to the true etymology of the word patisi, but Dr. Movers is probably correct in deriving it from the Greek verb patasso, to beat, to pound, to knock, from whence patisi, a hammer." End quote. Further down the same page we read, quote, "My conjecture is that patisi especially appertained to the Kabiric craftsmen, originally designating the gavel, perhaps made of horn, and taken as symbol of the highest authority. In such case, the relation of this term to the Hebrew patish, hammer, and to patasi, applied to the Kabiric images, would be easily explained." End quote. In Miller's seminal work, he thoroughly expands upon the connection of this phrase, patishi Siri, and its particular usage to denote a class of priest-kings in whom the sacerdotal and priestly functions were united. This is an early Mesopotamian, Aryan, and Pelasgian conception of the philosopher-king, later popularized by the Magian-initiated Plato in his dialogue, The Republic. Of particular interest is its connotation of a hammer, specifically a gavel, denoting the highest authority. Here we have the archetype of the cosmic judge, the initiate who sports wisdom, whom holds the balance, whom ensures contracts. This is a portrait of Nabu, explicitly syncretized in the Parthian period with Mithra. Nabu holds the tablets of destiny, and Nabu is Hermes. Nabu is Thoth, the revealer, and the revealed one, the Logos, the Word, who in the beginning was with God and was God. This guild of priest-kings was especially associated with Masonry, that is to say, the construction of such temples such as that of Borsippa, referred to as the Harmode by Miller, which was the seven-tiered tower of Nabu or Hermes, with the eighth stage representing heaven, just as Mithra resides in the eighth heaven. Nabu, Thoth, Hermes was associated especially with Hermopolis, after whom the Greeks named the city. The city was also known as El Eshmunin, where the Egyptian Ogdod or Kabiyeri were especially worshipped. Inscriptions within the temple at El Eshmunin refer to Thoth as the Lord of Eshmun. Dr. Schrader gives the meaning of the phrase Patishi as sublime master, which pertains to the third degree of craft masonry, the sublime degree of master mason, which degree is necessary for most instances for further initiation into appendant rites of masonry, such as the degrees of the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite or the degrees of the York Rite. Freemasonry is a highly compartmentalized institution, and perhaps the most striking aspect of its ranks is the degree of secrecy to which it holds. Craft Masonry is often misleadingly referred to as the highest degree of Freemasonry, as a direct result of this compartmentalization. Mislead and misdirect could well be a de facto motto of the organization as a whole. Here is the oath of the entered apprentice, the very first degree of the organization. Note that the name Peter Gabe is simply a placeholder. Quote, I, Peter Gabe, of my own free will and accord, in the presence of Almighty God in this worshipful lodge, erected to him and dedicated to the holy Saint John, do hereby and hereon most solemnly and sincerely promise and swear that I will always hail to ever conceal and never reveal any of the arts, parts, or points of the hidden mysteries of ancient Freemasonry, which may have been or hereafter shall be at this time or any future period communicated to me, as such to any person or persons whomsoever, except it be to a true and lawful brother Mason, or in a regularly constituted lodge of Masons, nor unto him or them until, by strict trial, due examination, or lawful information, I shall have found him or them as lawfully entitled to the same as I am myself. I furthermore promise and swear that I will not print, paint, stamp, stain, cut, carve, mark, or engrave them, or cause the same to be done, on anything movable or immovable, capable of receiving the least impression of a word, syllable, letter, or character, whereby the same may become legible or intelligible to any person under the canopy of heaven, and the secrets of masonry thereby unlawfully obtained through my unworthiness. All this I most solemnly, sincerely promise and swear, with a firm and steadfast resolution to perform the same, without any mental reservation or secret evasion of mind whatever, binding myself under no less penalty than that of having my throat cut across, my tongue torn out by its roots, and my body buried in the rough sands of the sea at low water mark, where the tide ebbs and flows twice in 24 hours, should I ever knowingly violate this, my entered apprentice obligation. So help me God, and keep me steadfast in the due performance of the same. End quote. Having expanded a tad upon the organization in question and the archetype of the cosmic judge, it will be necessary at this junction, as we move more generally into the realm of law, to give a brief history of the Order of the Templar Knights, with the forthcoming description given directly by the same institutions of law that we will afterwards discuss. Quoting from middletemple.org.uk, quote, The Knights Templar. Before the emergence of the two societies of the Temple, these lands were occupied by the Knights Templar, an order of religious knights that had been founded in Jerusalem in 1119 in order to defend the routes of pilgrimage to that holy city. Receiving official papal recognition in 1139, they quickly spread across Europe and the Holy Land, accumulating power, authority, responsibility, and land. After first settling in Holborn at some point before 1148, the Templars moved their London headquarters down to the area south of Fleet Street, where they began in 1160 to build a new church, modeled on the round church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. This church was completed and consecrated in 1185 by Heraclius, Patriarch of Jerusalem, and is known today as the Temple Church. A substantial complex of buildings, including cloisters, chapels, halls, mills, a brewhouse, and a granary, grew up around Temple Church, the area coming to be known as the New Temple. A great gate was constructed at the Fleet Street entrance to the land, and on the site of the present-day Middle Temple Gate, and landing stages were constructed for access to and from the Thames. Royal connections with the temple, well established today, were already in evidence during the Templar period. Extensive use was made of the buildings as a repository for royal treasure, tax revenue, and other valuables. During the crisis surrounding the rebellion of the barons and the signing of Magna Carta, King John used the temple as a headquarters on numerous occasions. Despite their international spread and prestige, the tide began to turn against the Templars and Christendom in general in the Levant. Jerusalem was lost for good in 1244, and the knights were forced to abandon Acre in 1291. The failure of the religious order to maintain a foothold in the Holy Land rendered them obsolete and vulnerable to the machinations of earthly powers that were jealous of their wealth and extensive property, particularly King Philip IV of France. King Philip was bankrupt following extensive wars with the English, and had been persuaded by his advisors that the Templars practiced idolatry and were guilty of perversions and blasphemy. Accordingly, he summoned the order's Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, to Paris, and promptly had he and other members of the order in France arrested, tortured, to extract confessions, and burned at the stake. The fate of the Templars in England was less extreme but similarly decisive. Pope Clement V, enthralled to the French king, officially disbanded the order in 1312, thus putting an end to their activities in London. Unlike their French counterparts, they did not face the stake and were allowed freedom to find a new path, for the most part joining other religious orders." End quote. It would do well to insert here that within the ranks of the York Rite are the chivalric orders in which the initiate assumes the identity of Templar Knight through the progressive ranks of the illustrious Order of the Red Cross, the Order of Malta, and the Order of the Temple. The Temple is a reference to Solomon's Temple, the central piece of iconography within Masonry, which stood in Jerusalem, which is now associated with Temple Mount within Jerusalem, modern Israel. That central piece of iconography within that tradition, which seems to have enslaved the minds of half of the world's population, that daunting population whom deem it fit to argue over which of them has found the best way to practice their mental bondage, rather than to see the Leviathan that looms over their consciousness. The Temple of Solomon is what lent to the designation of the Templar headquarters in England as being named the Second Temple. This is why, even in modern day, two of the Inns of Court are known as Inner Temple and Middle Temple. Further, it is why members are still referred to as Templars. The first recorded Englishman initiated into Freemasonry was Elias Ashmole, whom is listed by the Middle Temple website as, quote, a notable Middle Templar. The popular narrative regarding Freemasonry traces its mainstream roots to the founding of the Grand Lodge of England in 1717, yet Ashmole's personal diary records his being initiated at Warrington in Lancashire in 1646, 71 years prior to this narrative. Here we are reminded of that proposed de facto motto, mislead and misdirect. As an interesting tidbit, a Scottish man by the name of Robert Murray was made a Freemason 5 years prior to Ashmole at Newcastle, May 20th, 1641. Ashmole was a founding member of the Royal Society. There was discourse printed in the Masonic Mercury Journal revolving around the Royal Society being a secretive network established specifically for Freemasonic activity, in fact. J.R. Clarke's forensic study suggests that at least 24 fellows listed in the 1723 Grand Lodge records were Freemasons, with dozens more joining by 1730, that is, fellows of the Royal Society. Trevor Stewart notes that 39 Freemasons were proposed for election as fellows by other Freemasons prior to 1754, indicating a strong internal network. As to the question of the Templars and the Inns of Court, there is a curious link between the Declaration of the United States, the Constitution, and the Inns. In fact, the prototype for the Constitution, the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut, was drafted by Roger Ludlow, who was a member of Inner Temple. So far as have been found, among the founders are Arthur Middleton, signer of the Declaration, member of Middle Temple; Charles Jared Ingersoll, congressman and legal writer, member of Middle Temple; William Livingston, signer of Constitution, New Jersey, governor, Middle Temple; John Dickinson, drafter of the Articles of Confederation, Middle Temple; Charles Cotesworth Pinckney, signer of Constitution, South Carolina, diplomat, Middle Temple; John Rutledge, signer of Constitution, SCOTUS, Chief Justice, Middle Temple; Charles Pinckney, signer of Constitution, Middle Temple, also a governor; John Blair Jr., signer of Constitution, SCOTUS Justice, Middle Temple; Thomas McKean, signer of Declaration, governor, Middle Temple; Edward Rutledge, signer of Declaration, Middle Temple; Thomas Hayward, signer of Declaration, Middle Temple; Thomas Lynch Jr., signer of Declaration, Middle Temple; William Paca, signer of Declaration, federal judge, Inner Temple. Bear in mind, this is very likely not an extensive list, it's simply what's been found so far. Bear in mind, too, that an original draft copy of the U.S. Constitution hangs on the walls of Middle Temple, with John Adams quoting as having stated that the first time he saw the Constitution was in a foreign country, which would have been England. Not necessarily definitive proof that it was drafted in England, but curious nonetheless. All barristers within England and Wales are required to be members of the Inns of Court. Roughly 18,000 practicing lawyers. The Inns of Court of Northern Ireland are also historically linked with Masonry, with all barristers there required to hold membership of the Inn of Court of Northern Ireland. The American Inns of Court Foundation, through a declaration of friendship signed between Chief Justice Warren E. Burger and Lord Bridge of Harwich, 1988, has established regular pilgrimages for the American Inns of Court to the English Inns on an individual basis. There are nearly 400 chartered American Inns of Court operating in 48 states with approximately 30,000 members throughout the United States. Hermes, Eshmun, Thoth, Mithra, is the god of many things, but eloquence, the spoken and written word, and contracts are some of the most prominent aspects. The act of creating law is the act of creating binding, or bondage. It is, in itself, the act of mind control through both the written and spoken word, the act of enslavement through vague, ambiguous, inflated language, with any given law being quite literally nothing more than a phantasmal concept in the mind of some person. Much like currency, which is also a phantom, metaphysical concept of enslavement via debt, and coincidentally, another primary facet of Hermes. Mislead and misdirect. It is often stated in modern day that Freemasonry, while once powerful and notorious, has become something of a boys' club. Nothing more than a get-together of old men who like to play bingo or throw darts or whatever. Mislead and misdirect. Any individual no matter how seemingly learned any, and I mean literally anyone, who has ever tried to make that claim is either misleading and misdirecting or a genuine, bona fide moron, whether through literally being mentally inept or through institutionalized stupidity. I'll leave off with the information presented thus far with the closing question. Take a look at the world around you, and take some time to learn about the circumstances of different countries and different peoples outside the window of mainstream news agencies, that massive, daunting propaganda vehicle. Ask yourself, is this truly the rule of the wise? Is this the result of the just judge whom holds the cosmic balance? Or is this a caricature of that archetype in desperate need of rebalancing? Much love.